Hello everyone, I'm Krasi, and today I will look together with you at the chart, the birth chart of Italy. Italy is going through such tragedy nowadays, and I also received many requests from you, and you even gave me the date of birth of Italy, which is 10th of June 1946, 5 p.m. So this is also the official birth date of Italy, which I found also on the internet. So let's look together at the chart of Italy to see why Italy is going through such enormous tragedy. Unfortunately, there is a reason. Shockingly, I saw astrology works amazingly. You can just see why people go through these difficult times. And I will not talk anymore. I'll just share my screen with you and let's see together. So I'm using sidereal, fixed sidereal Babylonian zodiac, which is only 1 degree different from the zodiac which the Vedic astrologers use. So you see, I simplified a lot this chart to be visible for all of you. So this is the birth chart of Italy, Rome, 10th of June, 1946. So you can see that the ascendant is falling in the 24th degrees of Libra. And this is okay. Of course, typically for Italy, their romantic attitude and emotional perception of life, this is the nature of people, which is very beautiful. We see that Venus is an evening star, that the rising term, this section of the ascendant is ruled by Venus, so the nation is very much like Venus. And you also see that the Almuten, the planet which rules the horoscope, is also Venus. Very, very understandable. The people are creative. They love life, love, romance, beauty. In Italy, you can see beauties which you can't see anywhere else in the world. So Venus definitely is ruling the horoscope of the Italians. What we see here is the moon on the ascendant. The moon is in the 11 degrees on the ascendant. And I will tell you one thing here. This is mundane chart, the chart of a nation. And typically, I would tell you that the moon, the placement of the moon on the ascendant is, the moon doesn't like the ascendant, so to say. The moon doesn't love the ascendant. So this is weakening the nation. This is making people vulnerable. The moon on the ascendant. And even if you see in a natal chart, people who have moons on the ascendant are vulnerable. Of course, we need to look at many other characteristics, but literally the moon doesn't love the ascendant for whichever chart, whatever chart you look at. So the moon is in the 11 degrees of Libra. This is fine because there you're having very creative and beautiful stars. But this is not the point now. What is the point? What is very interesting is the first I will tell you what I immediately saw when if you compare this horoscope with the horoscope of the United States, you will see that this chart is difficult. The horoscope of the United States was made by astrologers. I am sure that there was this team of brilliant astrologers, probably Freemasons, like we all know for the States, which would say we're going to make symbolic start of the country on this and this date. And you see it because you're having the birth chart of America made with the heliacal rise of Aldebaran, the most powerful star of money and wealth. So obviously astrologers with great ancient knowledge created the horoscope of the states, which is valid until nowadays. Of course, there is no perfect horoscope, so certainly we are not here on earth to see perfection in the materialism. Our perfection need to come through our spiritual connections. But this is also another story. What I noticed in this horoscope is that this horoscope, the establishment, the real start or the symbolical start of the country was not made by talented astrologers. This is just a difficult, very, very difficult chart. What is this? Let me illustrate. First of all, the ascendant ruler is Venus, and Venus is together with Saturn in the last term, the last degrees of Gemini. Probably you all know that the very last 3 degrees of every sign are considered the most difficult because they're always ruled, according to Hermes Trismegistus, they're always ruled by malefic planet. So is also valid for the last 3 degrees, 5 degrees actually, but the last 3 degrees in particular of Gemini. So we are having Venus and Saturn together. Not that Venus and Saturn are enemies. Saturn loves Venus, always. Saturn is in his own Saturnian term, which is powerful position. I also found ancient text where the ancients claim that Gemini is a sign where Saturn is exalted. I don't know why. We all know that Saturn is exalted in Libra classically, but for one or another reason, Saturn has particular dignities in the sign of Gemini. So Saturn is diurnal planet. The chart is diurnal. Saturn in own term, Saturn in the sign of Gemini. This Saturn positioned this way is very, very, very powerful. He's trining the ascendant indeed, he's trining the moon indeed, but trine by Saturn is a trine by malefic planet. This Saturn will give longevity of the nation. The Italian nation is not going to die out for sure. This Saturn, who is making trine towards the moon, is definitely giving longevity of the nation. This nation will live long, but Saturn is associated with limitations, with a lack of products, lack of money, of poverty. Saturn is the planet which is never bringing abundance, just the opposite of Jupiter, who is associated with abundance. Saturn can give abundance of power, but depends how wise we are, how wise a nation is. But this is, again, we can speak about this in maybe when we look at Saturn in a detail. But Saturn with Venus is heavily limited. And what is Venus? Venus is ruling the ascendant. Venus is associated with money because Venus is ruling also the 8th house. So we're having Mercury, Venus, and Saturn in the 9th house of the nation. What is this? The diplomatic relationships, the diplomatic connections. This is every connection of the country, of course, with the other world, with the other countries. And having the ascendant ruler with Saturn, with Mercury in the 9th house is indeed powerful when he's saying that the life of the country and the well-being of the country is kind of depending on the international relationships. This is the communication for the Italian nation with the outer world is very, very important. Another thing which is very, very amazing here, which is actually the very lucky star of the horoscope, is Mercury, who is in own sign in Gemini and just born from the rays of the sun as an evening star. Mercury is just born from the rays of the sun, extremely powerful Mercury. So Mercury is actually showing that this nation is going to be successful mainly through negotiations or relationships with other countries, negotiations, media, and so on. But I will tell you that Mercury, Venus, and Saturn together, Saturn diurnal planet and Mercury and Venus nocturnal evening stars with Saturn, this looks like quite a limitation. This is also a bit about hypocrisy, lots of hypocrisy. But I will tell you what for me triggered the tragedy, which is still the ongoing tragedy in Italy. But before that, let's look at something particularly important. And this is the placement of the Sun, Uranus, and the lunar node Rahu in almost exact conjunction in the sign of Taurus. in the 8th house of the nation, where we're having the secret services, the secrets, all the secret stuff, all the secret banking. And what is happening here? We are having Uranus, where he has totally no dignities in the sign of Taurus, in the also in the term of Saturn, together with the Sun and together with the lunar node. And I know I've learned that when Rahu and the Sun are together, there are some influences which can be considered as negative, even influences from how to put this, influences from the world, which is the negative influences, so to say, very much like hidden secrets, hidden societies playing very important role in the rulership of the Italian country. Sun and the lunar node and Uranus together. What is happening? Secrecy, a lot of secrecy, secret rulership, because look what is happening. The Sun is ruling the 11th house of the rulerships, of the rulers, because the 11th house is naturally ruled by Uranus, by Aquarius. So actually what is supposed to be open, what is supposed to be revealed to the public is happening behind the scenes, and we're having the influences of secret societies. But what is the key position here, which you will not see through any other astrology, but only through the ancient Babylonian astrology? And this is the placement of Rahu in a sacred degree. What is a sacred degree? I made separate video on this on my channel. You can find it somewhere on my playlists. The sacred degrees are showing priesthood, past life associated, karma associated with priesthood. And when Rahu is there, the ruling class is aiming at dark influences over the people, secret and manipulative influences. I don't want to get into detail. I am sure that you understand what I mean. Manipulations which are going beyond boundaries, which are using dark matters and priesthood of all unimagined means. So this is what is happening in Italy. Why am I mentioning this now? Because we will be looking at what triggered the tragedy, but this is one of the things which triggered the tragedy, because this is happening in the 8th house of the country, where people are dying. 8th house is death, not only in the natal charts of people. 8th house is death also in the horoscopes of countries and secret societies and secret matters and just anything like that. And also this is a sacred degree which is actually not pure. This sacred degree is supposed to be conjunct with the moon, conjunct with the sun, but not with Rahu. If with Rahu this degree is not pure, it's being afflicted. It's being afflicted literally. And this is why maybe the Italian people are having these difficult times through some karmic lessons. But I am not a specialist in karma in general, but in astrology you can see the karmic debts which we need to pay. But interestingly here is that Italy, actually it happened in where was this, in April 2017. Uranus entered Aries. What is this? Now look, where is Uranus? Is naturally ruling the 11th house and the 5th house, but you can see that Uranus is in the 8th, the house of death. And this is not a good placement of Uranus, also because he's having a very wide square with Mars, and being with the Sun and being with Rahu this is definitely not a good position of Uranus. Uranus needs to be well placed in a horoscope in order not to be harmful. I can tell you that Uranus can cause such harms that it's beyond comprehension, more than Saturn. I'm telling you this. If Uranus is not well placed in a horoscope, I've seen tragedies that cannot be even explained. So, what is happening? In April 2017, we're having Uranus who entered the 7th house of Italy. I am not following the politics of Italy, but those of you who do, and those of you who are Italians, probably will say, oh, around this time, we noticed that there is a crisis of the rulership, there is crisis of poverty, that there is crisis happening on every level of the rulership of the country. And Uranus entered Aries and made square to Pluto. Pluto is the natural ruler of the 8th house of every horoscope. Another thing is here is that last month, a month ago, around the time, I couldn't see exactly where the tragedy in Italy bursted to such an enormous degree, but I know one thing: Uranus is hitting before he makes exact aspect. So look what is happening. 1 month ago, today is 29th of March, 1 month ago, Uranus was in the 11th degree of Aries. And guess what? He made exact to a degree opposition to the moon and a square to Pluto, who is ruling death, who is ruling the 2nd house, who is naturally ruling the 8th of every horoscope. So you can see that this was very, very dangerous T-square, heavy T-square, which Uranus, who is pointing towards the death in the horoscope of Italy, caused. So Uranus made a heavy T-square. Now I mentioned to you what I noticed in many horoscopes which I read, many, I noticed that Uranus, before he makes the exact aspect, like in this case, he made exact opposition to the moon. He's so sharp, like a thunder, that he influenced Italy before the exact opposition. He was already working heavily on the destiny of the Italian people, because he's coming from the house of death, and he's also in the 7th. Actually, I can tell you that the 7th house in the ancient astrology is associated with death. And why? Because the 7th house is where we're having the place where the sun is descending, the sun is dying out, the sun is hiding on the western horizon, which is here. That's why in ancient astrology, when there will be a question about death, people would first look at the 7th house, then eventually 4th and 8th. But the 7th house is heavily associated with death. So what we had here, only by a pure transit, not even by looking at the primary directions of the country, which is always, the primary directions always point towards important events, we are seeing the heavy T-square. And guess what? Not only a T-square, we're having a grand cross. Why? Because in January 31, Saturn entered Capricorn. And Saturn in Capricorn, extremely heavy, made opposition to Pluto and made a heavy T-square, heavy cross. Guess what is the cross? The cross is really heavy stuff. So Saturn here made the opposition to Pluto, square to the moon. And when the luminary being so vulnerable, see how vulnerable this moon is, receiving the aspect from Saturn, receiving square from Pluto, receiving aspect from Mars, very vulnerable nation is the Italian nation, unfortunately. And these people, after leaving this tragedy, like in a horror movie now, these people need to symbolically make another horoscope of Italy, like launching another celebration, another event on a better date, which should change this horoscope of Italy, really, because this is a heavy horoscope that has only one brilliant stuff, and this is Mercury in the 9th house, which is showing a very good manipulative, most probably international diplomacy. So as you can see, astrology is this horoscope, and what I saw when I was preparing for showing you, this blew my mind literally. Another thing is, you can see that even Jupiter is fallen. Who is the one who is giving the most of the blessings? This is Jupiter, who is giving abundance, who is giving the children, who is giving the most beautiful spirituality and philosophy. Yes, in the 12th house, Jupiter can be very fine, very spiritual, but he's stationary and fallen, and in a term of Mars, he is not, and he is ruling the healthcare, the health system of Italy, 6th house, because the 6th house in the mundane horoscope is ruling the healthcare, the health of the nation. And guess what? Fallen. Literally, this country is lacking healthcare. Lack of healthcare. It's just bad. So unfortunately, this is what Jupiter is telling us, together with the other ruler, Neptune. Neptune is ruling the 6th house, and he's also in the 12th house. So this is not a good picture. Now, what happened also, look what happened is that in December, last days of December, we had, of course, Jupiter, we know, is in the Sagittarius, and he's helping in a way. But look, what is the thing is that when the natal Jupiter is not strong enough, the transiting Jupiter also cannot be helpful enough, because the natal Jupiter is not present with a heavy presence in the life of the Italian people, and they are so vulnerable with this moon on the ascendant. So well, let's see what is going to happen further. Of course, obviously, also this event is given by the Creator. Everything, the good, the bad, comes from the Creator. And of course, also that if people die, it was in their horoscope. Why they die as groups? Because so was their contract, maybe, before they were descending. It's so sad. It's so sad for us who are on Earth. But most probably, these people who passed now, this was in their horoscopes that on this particular time they would pass, and probably also this was. There is one saying that the soul is leaving. We die only when the soul agrees. So they wouldn't die if it was not in their horoscopes. And the horoscope of Italy is also not very fine. Another thing is that, let's see how this will be developing. Now, look what is happening. We had here soon enough Jupiter-Pluto in the sign of Sagittarius, which actually triggered this even more. Then we're having even now, today, 29th of March, we're having Saturn with Mars, who is triggering tremendously this square here. Very, very bad, because Mars is about the rulership, Saturn as well, both. And they are here triggering this cross. So it's not done yet. Unfortunately, I don't think that this is done. But Mars is going to leave. Let's see when Mars was going to leave. 1 second. So yes, on 4th of May, Mars is leaving Capricorn. And maybe they will have relief. I believe they will do. I hope so. And they will have relief. But then we're having these eclipses, which are happening on the axis of the sun. And this is, one of them is 5th, 6th of June in the summer. So this will be a timing which may not be very easy. And they will have relief, but then we will be having the Mars is going to enter the seventh house of the Italians and will join Uranus. And this is not very fine. So actually, August is also, September, August is timing which will not be very easy for them. After that, they may have these difficulties which will aspect everything, the rulership, the economy, and everything, because Saturn, like we see for 2.5 years, will be heavily making this cross, which we saw in the horoscope. But what will happen after? After already 2 years, when Saturn is entering Aquarius, from there he will be squaring the 8th and the 2nd house, the financial system, which will say that for the Italians will be very hard to recover. So either after this crisis, and then we'll have huge relief in the summer with some moments of difficulties, like I told you, around the eclipses, especially the one in June will be on the solar axis of the country, which is not very fine. But after that, there will be relief. And then in September, the time may not be very easy. After that, people will unfortunately experience the difficulties of these current events for longer than we think if they do not restart the horoscope of Italy, because of the square which Saturn will make towards the 8th and the 2nd houses for another 2 years. So if we count 2 years from now, where Saturn will still activate the cross. Let me share again the screen and illustrate better. So you see Saturn is here for another 2 years, and he will be activating heavily this cross. And in the meantime, Uranus is here, where I'm showing you. So we're having a very heavy cross. After 2 years and some months, Saturn moves in the sign of Aquarius, also very, very powerful. From here, he will actively square the natal sun, which sun is in the 8th house, and with this Saturn will be squaring the axis of money, and people will suffer tremendously these events, but this time more as financial very bad circumstances which will occur after this is ending. Now what is happening? Mars is leaving on the 4th, 5th of May, entering the 5th house. He will square the sun, but at least, well, not completely easing up the situation, but well, it's better than when Saturn and Mars were here until 4th of May. And then the easier situation will be after he leaves and enters the 6th house of the country. The 6th house of the country is the health of the nation, but at least he will not square a luminary, which is crucial when we're looking at health of a nation. And then in the autumn, last days of August, Mars is entering his own house, powerful, making opposition to the moon, and this is not good also. So unfortunately, with some ups and downs, people will go through this difficult situation. And what we can do is to really pray for them. Actually, the God's plan is maybe for people to awaken, to find their path, spiritual path. Otherwise, he wouldn't give these difficult, tragic events. And you can see in 2.5 years when Saturn will be here, even though this is the house of the good fortune, he will be squaring the sun, and he will be completely blocking the gains of people, completely blocking the finances. So I see some financial difficulties which will occur with the second, especially when Saturn leaves the sign of Capricorn in 2 years. When will be this? End of 2022. I didn't calculate exactly, but count 2.5 years. So here he will be squaring, and the Italian people will go through financial troubles. So this is about the chart of Italy. How people reset the horoscopes of a nation. First of all, I can tell you that it's never very decisive if a horoscope of a nation is correct. For example, for my Bulgarian natal chart, for our horoscope, it never worked. It just doesn't work. And even the spiritual teachers like Bein Sadunu would say that they wouldn't say which is the real horoscope of the nation. For some reasons, we're not supposed to know it. So sometimes if we think that we know a horoscope of a nation, we don't always. These horoscopes seem to work, unfortunately, seeing the global, very, very dramatic events. So probably this is the horoscope of Italy. But how people have new birth charts, a nation, it's always associated with events. These events are so, so crucial that they can lead, after people are healed from the tragedy now, they can maybe think of another, symbolically having another horoscope of the nation, like when they say we're liberated from these events, maybe this can be taken as another horoscope, but of course this has to be done on a better date than the one that they have as in their natal chart. The natal chart of Italy is very hard, and you see this. You see how easily how vulnerable the people are. When you see moon on the ascendant of a nation, this is definitely vulnerability. When you see how manipulated the nation is from all perspectives inside, you can imagine what is going on. So I believe that these events are so tragic that once people are healed, this will be a new birth of the nation, and they can have a better horoscope. Like I made the comparison with the States. You can see how smart they made it. They had Aldebaran not only on the ascendant, but Aldebaran was in the first heliacal day, in the first morning, first when the star was just born. And what is Aldebaran? The eye of the bull, the star associated with the best of power and wealth and yes. So here you indeed have in this horoscope Mercury, who is very in his own sign, and this is fine. But Mercury is not saving people when they're ill. Mercury will give you good diplomatic opportunities. He will give you good communication, maybe. He can give you wealth. Mercury can give money. But Mercury will definitely not give healing. So with this particular key position of Rahu in a sacred degree, the really people need to pray a lot, need to do a lot, need to turn their eyes to God, because this is a timing of awakening. Maybe one day we will say thank you to this timing. The world will say thank you because we will all be awake. We live in the last days of the era of Pisces, and we're in sub-era of Mars, of Aries, and such events are not surprising. They can occur, unfortunately, and they used to occur historically. If you remember, I showed you the video of the horoscopes of the three major world illnesses, and they all happened when Mars was heavily involved, because Mars is ruling the sudden tragic events for humanity. So yes, pray. Let's pray for these people, and they should pray a lot. And I will tell you another thing. I will finalize with this because I think it's quite strong. The master Bein Sadunu said the following: if in one village of, let's say, 10,000 people, I'm not quoting literally, I'm out of memory. If in one village out of 10,000 people, you have only one who is praying and who is decent, he is able to save the whole village. So have faith in your own powers. We are not nobody. We are children of God, and God is living within us. So we can do miracles if we are maintaining high moral values, and also if we're praying and if we're connected with God. So let me finish with this. Stay strong in these times of trouble. And remember that we're dying only if we agree, and we're dying only if this is encoded in our horoscopes. So thank you.